Happy Labor Day weekend to the beloved community at Riverside Church. It's such an honor to be able to address you today during this important time in our culture to honor workers. I bring greetings from domestic workers, the nannies, cleaners, and care workers who support our families through their care and their labor. They're predominantly women and majority Black and immigrant women of color, and their work holds our families up. I can tell you they love the work that they do. They take an enormous pride in the way that they shape our children's capacity to learn, to feel joy, and to make meaning of the world. And they are so proud of the way they enable our loved ones with disabilities to live fully independent lives. They're honored that they can care for the people who cared for us, our parents and elders, and ensure that they have the dignity they deserve at such an important time in their lives. They know the value of their work, but unfortunately the rest of society too often doesn't. Still referred to as help, domestic work is some of the least visible and most undervalued work in our economy today. Most domestic workers work incredibly hard, but still struggle to pay the bills. Women like Glenna, who is an immigrant house cleaner from the Caribbean living in Brooklyn, she just takes so much pride in the work she does to clean homes, but she doesn't have the health care, paid sick days, or time off, or the job security that she needs to take care of herself. We count on people like Glenna to take care of us and the people we love most, but they really struggle to care for themselves and the people they love doing the work that they do. And they've been pretty invisible in our economy. When we think about American workers who drive our economy, the image we draw up is never the house cleaner. On March 18th, 1968, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. made a speech in support of sanitation workers in Memphis. In his speech to the workers, he said, "You're doing many things here in this struggle. You're demanding that this city will respect the dignity of labor. So often we overlook the work and the significance of those who are not in professional jobs, of those who are not in so-called big jobs. But let me say to you tonight," he said, "that whenever you are engaged in the work that serves humanity and is for the building of humanity, it has dignity and it has worth. One day our society must come to see this. One day our society will come to respect the sanitation worker if it is to survive. For the person who picks up our garbage in the final analysis is as significant as the physician, for if he doesn't do his job, diseases are rampant. All labor has dignity," he said. More than 50 years later, it took a pandemic, but we are reminded of the many forms of labor, including domestic work, that are essential to our lives. Domestic workers have been caring through this crisis, making sure that some of the people who are most vulnerable to the virus itself, like people with disabilities, people with chronic illnesses, and older people, that they're safe. Home care workers have been often the only lifeline to food, medication, and human contact, not to mention essential activities of daily living for so many in this crisis. And they've been doing this all while their children are home from school and need to access remote learning. They've been without PPE or proper health and safety protections. They've been paying out of pocket for safer means of transportation to and from work. Like one of our members, Recto, who is a home care worker in the Bronx, not far from where you are, who pays for a taxi or Uber to get to clients so that he can minimize the risk of exposure on public transportation. Using the meager income he earns, he pays out of pocket for that. Most home care workers don't have health care, and the average annual salary is $16,000 per year. It took a pandemic, but now we see just how essential the work of care is. Early in the crisis, we began to applaud our essential workers. At the time, we saw those workers as primarily our healthcare workers. the nurses and the doctors managing huge influxes of patients with COVID-19. But then, almost every day, as we struggled to navigate this new pandemic life, we discovered new groups of workers who've enabled our safety and well-being. I'm thinking of the grocery workers, the delivery workers, the farm workers, the logistics workers, and so many more who have kept our country going in this unprecedented time. And we have been applauding them. We have been recognizing them. But what have we done to protect them? What have we done to protect them? Nothing yet. Later in that same speech, Dr. King continued to say to the workers, "But you are doing another thing. You are reminding not only Memphis, but you are reminding the nation that it is a crime for people to live in this rich nation and receive starvation wages. Do you know that most of the poor people in our country are working every day? And they're making wages so low they cannot begin to function in the mainstream of the economic life of our nation. These are facts which must be seen," he said. "And it is criminal to have people working on a full-time basis and a full-time job getting paid part-time income. You are here tonight to demand that Memphis will do something about the conditions that our brothers face as they work every day in and day out for the well-being of the total community. You are here to demand that Memphis will see the poor." That is what Dr. King said to the Memphis sanitation workers. And we bring his words back because not only has the pandemic revealed how many invisible workers are actually essential, but it has revealed another epidemic, the epidemic of low-wage work in America. Dr. King described more than 50 years ago. Not only have millions of essential workers been invisible to us, they are also undervalued and unprotected like domestic workers. Domestic workers are not the exception, unfortunately, or the aberration. They are beginning to become the rule. When I first started organizing domestic workers in the 1990s, it was unusual to talk about domestic work, and the workforce was very much considered marginal and in the shadows of the economy. But today, when I look around, the conditions that have always defined domestic work, unpredictable hours, lack of access to any kind of benefits or a safety net, no health care, time off, no job security, wages that prevent you from being able to buy food your family needs. These are conditions that increasingly define more and more of the American workforce. Working poverty, the type that Dr. King described, has become an epidemic in America. And it will come as no surprise to you that low-wage workers are disproportionately people of color and women. This particular epidemic has its roots in the legacy of slavery in America. Some of the first domestic workers were enslaved Black women who, ever since slavery was abolished, have disproportionately borne the brunt of caring for our families. And our Congress, long after slavery was abolished, explicitly excluded domestic workers and farm workers from the protection of our nation's labor laws as they were established. Yes, Southern members of Congress refused to support the National Labor Relations Act and the Fair Labor Standards Act if they included protections for farm workers and domestic workers who were Black at the time. Generations of workers' conditions were shaped by that exclusion, and the imprint of it has come to shape more and more work in America than we care to admit. And when we look at the work we value in America throughout our economy, you will see systems that are whiter and more male at the top of the hierarchy, and the lower down you go, the more people of color and women are concentrated. Take education as an example. When you look at who are the presidents of top universities and hold tenured or chair positions in those institutions, It's a lot of white men. But when we traverse into public education, elementary, early childhood, the closer we get to the work of care, the more women, especially women of color, you will find, and the lower the wages and more insecure the work will be. We are a service-driven economy, and service jobs are dominant. Jobs that have to do with caring, like domestic work and care jobs, are not only a huge part of the workforce, they're going to be a huge share of the jobs of the future. These are jobs we need, especially with a growing older population to care for. They are jobs that won't be outsourced and can't be automated. These are the jobs of the future, whether we like it or not. And as we've shifted away from manufacturing towards service jobs, we've also shifted away from the traditional employment structures that have offered economic security, where having a job meant that you had dignity, meaning, and the opportunity to deliver a better life to your family one generation at a time. We have lost that thread. One of the most important threads of all in America, the dignity of work. The thread that Dr. King described, that he and the sanitation workers tried to assert and fight for more than 50 years ago, we have somehow allowed dignified work to disappear for large segments of our workforce. The notion that all work has dignity and deserves protection, we have allowed that notion to slip away. We've forgotten that workers are in fact people with children, with parents to care for, people who get sick and develop disabilities, human beings who want meaning and the ability to make a contribution, to feel like it matters, and the ability to support their families. Basic needs that work in America should meet. The pandemic has catalyzed an unprecedented time of suffering for workers in our country. There's no glossing over that reality. Millions of jobs disappeared seemingly overnight, and we don't know when or if they will return. It's still not safe out there. Workers are struggling to find work, and workers who are working are struggling at work without a safety net in place, without the safety net that we have needed all along. And all of the risk of this time of crisis is falling on the shoulders of the people with the least amount of power and resources to navigate it, people like domestic workers. Nannies are being asked to care for more children in pods, to help with online learning as kids are kept home from school. They're asked for regular COVID tests and to bring their own PPE, to be flexible with their schedule and more. But what are we doing to protect and support them? So far, nothing. And that is where the good news comes in. There is no glossing over this crisis. There is no question that this disruption has shaken us up. Even as we are all yearning to go back to normal, we have also seen just how unacceptable and unsafe normal is. For the first time in a long, long time, America has awakened us to the crisis that workers have been facing. And together, we actually have the power we need to change it. This awakening has power behind it, the power of the American majority. We, all of us in this beautiful congregation and across the country, we have the power to change it all. And we know we owe it to our essential workers to do so. Even better, we have the solutions. We know how to address this crisis. We have the policy frameworks and the precedents. We have an essential workers Bill of Rights, a domestic worker Bill of Rights. We can push for universal health care, child care, and long-term care. We can raise the minimum wage and restore our voice at work. With this awakening, we have now a generational opening and mandate to remake our systems for the next era of workers. We can do it if we choose to do our part. So let this be the Labor Day where we do more than celebrate our workers. In the midst of an unprecedented pandemic and economic crisis, we are going to commit to more. Guided by the words of Dr. King, we will commit to meaningful and ongoing action to restore the dignity of work in America. Let's put workers at the forefront of our economic recovery and demand reforms that protect and elevate low-wage work in America once and for all. Let's remake our safety net to include and protect everyone. It's time, and it's the least we can do for the working people of this country who deserve dignity and so much more. Yes, we are essential, and together we can value work in America once again. Thank you.